Welcome back, everyone. Now, what a great day we are having so far with some truly wonderful sessions. Now, employee engagement is one of the biggest challenges HR leaders are struggling with in this new world of work. Now, to simplify employee engagement and to help us understand some ways to realign our culture and leadership to focus on maximizing people's engagement and productivity, we have with us Peter Go and Archana Ramesh. Now, Peter is the Director of HR and Organization at GIC and is responsible for the full range of people policy making and operations, including talent and organization strategy, rewards, people analytics, and more. Achana Ramesh leads the people science team across Asia Pacific with Glints and also works closely with the product team to integrate people science expertise into our technology. This is bound to be a great session. And now over to you, Peter and Achana.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining. I'm really excited to be talking to you today about how Glint has been helping companies respond in a very agile way to some really chaotic and tumultuous times that we've all been experiencing together. And also thinking about how we can reimagine the strategy for the future by putting people at the center of our strategy. We, alongside our partners at LinkedIn and Microsoft, have seen companies go through three phases as they have been navigating this pandemic, starting with a quick, agile response to some of the needs of the organization and their people when the pandemic first started, to thinking about a more thoughtful recovery plan that is tailored to the unique situation that each organization is in, all the way to moving forward to reimagining what the future could look like and what are some of the things that we need to potentially redesign with long-term success in mind. Now, of course, as with any change, it's never as perfectly mapped out as it is on paper, and in reality, it's often more messy and much less linear. But we do think it's helpful to look at it in terms of these three phases so that we can think about which of our strategies and interventions are really focused on right now, helping people navigate and really just get through the initial aspects of the crisis, and what are some of the things that we need to be really thinking about more from a long-term perspective so that we are able to set ourselves up for success for the future as well. Because we know that this is a pivotal moment, and we know from history that at these pivotal moments, the companies that are able to really thrive in the midst of change are the ones that are set up for long-term success. So I'm going to walk through each of these phases, starting with respond. Most of you have already gone through this particular phase. If you think back to what seemed like an especially chaotic time, there were some lessons learned that we can carry forward into other aspects of our journey as well. If you think back to around late January, going into February and March, when most of us were first hit by the COVID pandemic, we saw that many companies were really thinking about two important things. How do they help their employees feel safe, cared for, supported in the midst of all the uncertainty? And then how do they help their leaders make lightning speed decisions using well-informed data? And part of that data was also using people feedback. And this resulted in many of our company customers quickly pivoting to deploying pulses, sometimes in the matter of 48 hours after the pandemic hit, so that they could use that real-time feedback to act on what was most important to help their employees as well as their leaders make decisions. Of course, at that time, we didn't know what we didn't know, but we let research guide us on what, and when we looked at the research on what really impacts people during times of crisis, there were some important indicators of what we needed to get feedback on so that we could respond quickly. As we've studied employee sentiment in what drives engagement during times of change, the interesting thing is that the drivers aren't necessarily different from what people need during any time at work, but it's just that some of these drivers of engagement are heightened in terms of their impact during times of uncertainty and change. Starting with communication, people need to be well informed about how their organization is responding to the crisis and how they need to respond to their customers. They need to know that the leaders who are making decisions on their behalf are using the right information and that they are focused on employee well-being. They also need clarity on what are the things they need to prioritize and maybe even more importantly, deprioritize. And with those priorities, how do they execute on them and do they have the resources to be able to do that? And then finally, the driver that we see that spikes the most in terms of impact during times of crisis is people's sense of well-being. And one of the beautiful and fortuitous things about well-being being really important to focus on is that the best way, or one of the simplest ways that leaders can signal that they care about employee well-being is to ask for their feedback, is to check in with them and make sure that they're using that feedback to respond and really act on and influence decisions in the organization. So using some of these themes, a lot of our customers were able to quickly get feedback from their people that was really important in terms of driving their initial response strategy. So from healthcare companies that needed to adjust their PPE requirements by locations and help support their frontline workers, to technology companies that had to deploy new remote working policies essentially overnight and get feedback on them to ensure that they were addressing their needs. We really saw that many companies were benefiting from getting that real-time agile feedback right in the middle of their response strategy. In a bit, you're going to hear from Peter Go from GIC how they had used some of that initial employee feedback to guide their response strategy as well. Now, after that initial response, we really headed into recovery. And here we shifted more from some of that initial responding to the chaos from a more of a sprint mindset to a marathon mindset. And what is interesting is that, of course, a lot of us might actually be in the midst of this as we speak of it, right? And what's important to recognize here is that some of the ways that we might have responded to the crisis in the beginning might actually be unsustainable as we think ahead to a marathon mindset. And there's a lot that's being thrown at us, right? In this recovery period, you might be bringing back employees from furloughs. You might be having people going back into workplaces or restaurants or factories with new safety protocols and, and environments that look a lot different than they used to. Or in some cases, it might be people recognizing that they need to settle into working from home for a longer period of time than they ever anticipated. But again, a lot of the unique circumstances surrounding this might shape our individual recovery strategy. But what we have seen as a common theme is that some of the ways that we behaved or operated in that initial response phase were needed to be rethought of in this recovery period. And one of those key themes that we saw emerge to the top was really around burnout. Between March and May, we saw in employee feedback that the topic of burnout doubled in its volume of comments. Around the same time, we saw a pretty drastic decline in people's work-life balance scores as well. Our partners at Microsoft Analytics were noticing a 72% increase in messages that were being sent before and after what we would consider normal working hours. So it was clear that the always-on epidemic that we were already experiencing anyways was conflating with the COVID pandemic to really create record levels of burnout that we needed to address in our recovery phase. But the thing about solving for burnout is that it can't be a one-size-fits-all approach. These are some real examples of comments that we were getting, our clients were getting from getting feedback from their people. But when you take the global crisis that was happening, and you add on the fact that people's work responsibilities were changing, and in some cases they needed to do more work with fewer resources. And then you add on everyone's personal situation, whether it was elder care or child care. It really is a dynamic situation. And it's hard to address that with a one size fits all approach. And this is where, again, companies benefited from not assuming anything, but really using this as an opportunity to check in with their people and ask people, how are you doing? And so here again in this recovery period, we're seeing companies have a very thoughtful approach to checking in with their people, sending surveys that are, again, very focused, very short, not overwhelming people with a lot of questions or having them take a lot of time out of their day to do this, but asking some simple questions to check in with them on their well-being. Not because a survey will tell you everything you ever need to know, but because that can be the start of a conversation that a manager can have with their team, with their employees, to say, what's one thing we can do to improve your well-being incrementally and reduce burnout for you in the next few weeks? And it turns out that this point of connection is actually more important than we would have ever imagined. We've seen in our data over the last few months that when people feel a sense of connection, it does have a positive impact on their stress, and they're more likely to feel, they're less likely to feel burnt out when they feel that sense of connection with their organization. And they're also more likely to believe that their organization is invested in their well-being and is being supportive of their needs if they're able to feel that sense of connection. And so that is really a critical lever for us to pull as we think about that recovery phase and what we need to focus on for our people. You'll hear from Peter, who's going to talk a little bit more about how they use something called a GIC Cares survey to show that the company was really thinking about their employees' well-being through that recovery phase as well. Now, as we head into the future and talking about what the long-term impact of the COVID pandemic might be, again, many of us are in different phases of recovery based on where we are in the world, what sector we're in, and how our business has been impacted. But some of us are already recognizing that we need to start thinking about the future. We need to start redesigning what the workplaces of the future might be and put our people at the center of this redesign. There's a lot of things we don't know. And obviously, we're already starting to ask questions around what is the new normal? What is the workplace of the future? When do we get back to the workplace? But I would argue, and actually some of the better questions that are coming up right now are, do we go back to the workplace? And what does the workplace actually look like in the future? And is there such a thing as going back to the workplace? And the answer to all of these questions is obviously we don't know everything we need to know, but there are some early indicators that we might be seeing a wave of change. We're already finding that the future is flexible, as far as we know. And employees are telling us, 68% of employees, in fact, are telling us that they want more flexibility in where they work as well as when they work. So it's not that we're all going to continue to work from home for all eternity. It's not that we're all going to go back into the offices, but this idea that we can be flexible in how we work is becoming increasingly important. And so the question for us is really, how do we do that and make sure we're engaging with our people and maximizing engagement and productivity in this new future that's flexible? And what I really love about this quote from Terry Lynn, who heads up the people team at Varian Medical, one of our clients, is that many HR teams and many HR leaders around the world are using this as an opportunity to redefine what the new workplaces could look like. As she says here, and what they noticed in their employee feedback data as well as their goal attainment data was that people were quite productive when they were working at home. So do people really need to come back into the workplace to be productive? And maybe they really don't. So how do we make workplaces and office spaces be more about a unique proposition versus feeling like people have to come to work to get their work done? And how do we redesign and reimagine some of our workplace strategies to be able to do this? And so, with so much uncertainty about what the future holds, it's helpful to know what are some of the things that we are seeing that are going to be important for us to consider as some of the anchors of our redesign or reimagining strategy. And what the research is telling us is that there's really three things that we need to be keeping top of mind. And there's the three C's: connection, capability, and choice. I've already talked about connection, but I can't reinforce the importance of it because we have seen in the last few months that the impact that connection has on employees' engagement has dramatically increased. And when we talk about connection, of course, there's that person to person connection that matters, but it's beyond that. It's also about organizational connection. How connected do people feel to the mission, vision, purpose, and values of the company? Do they feel like the work that they're doing is contributing to the overall success and future of the company? These are aspects of people's sense of connection and belonging as well. The second C around capability is really around people feeling like they're learning and growing, especially when there's so much change happening. We're finding that people actually find it comforting to invest in themselves and invest in developing new capabilities. This has really shown up in how much more time people have spent in on digital learning platforms and virtual learning over the last few months. And 97% of employees are saying they want to keep or actually increase the amount of time they're spending learning as we go into the post-pandemic era. And the last C, around choice, is really about helping people feel agency. Again, in times of distress and uncertainty, people want to feel like they're in control of something, right? And so people really do want more empowerment in being able to design their work, really, design what it is they focus on, and even to the aspect of being flexible when they come to work and where they work. And we have seen in our data that those who will feel more empowered are over 3 times as likely to be engaged as well. And when we look more closely at some of this data, more specifically for employees within the Asia region, we can see that there's some work to do that really offers us some focus for what we need to be thinking about as we reimagine our workforce strategy. We are seeing that people are saying that they are feeling less connected to their leaders and coworkers, and nearly 40% of employees are asking for more time with their managers. You can also see that there's a real thirst to learn and develop and build new skills. And then finally, more than half of the employees that we got feedback from are saying they want more autonomy to design their work and establish work goals. And this need has surfaced even more strongly in Asia than it has in other regions. So clearly an opportunity area for us to be focused on empowerment and enabling choice as we think about the future. Now, again, we have a lot to learn about what's ahead of us. And when you think about what you need to be putting in place for reimagining the future, what I will tell you is don't think about it as sort of big initiatives or programs that you need to suddenly focus on developing. And in fact, in this case, less might be more. What I would really strongly encourage you to think about are some of the simple habits we need to start building right now as we recover so that we help ourselves out in the longer term by creating more sustainable practices that are going to set us up for success. And our research tells us that there's really 4 key habits that are central to people-centric organizations: getting timely feedback and using insights from those feedback mechanisms to focus on what's most important so that you can have really effective conversations that build connection in the workplace, but also then help you focus on the right priorities and set the most important goals that will help you move you as an individual forward, but also help move the organization forward and help you focus on what you need to learn and grow so that we're all able to develop more of a growth mindset and increase our resilience as we navigate uncertain times and times of crises. So with that, I will wrap up here, and thank you so much for joining. And I'll be handing it over to Peter, who will be sharing a lot more about how GIC has been going through these 3 phases of the journey and how they've taken a very people-centric and feedback-driven approach to their strategy as well. So thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be with all of you today and to share the journey that GIC has taken in response to the COVID pandemic. the ongoing learnings, as well as how we are thinking about the future. When it dawned on all of us about the seriousness of the virus globally, and coincidentally, March was also when we planned to roll out the full employee engagement survey. Now, we had run the first survey on the Glint platform back in September 19, and had wanted to shift to a more agile approach, and had planned to run it in March. The virus came, and it became clear to us that nobody would be interested to respond to those statements in the original survey. And we made a quick decision, right, to not run that survey, but to make sure that everybody was safe and was able to continue with their work processes from home. So we swung everybody to work from home sometime in March. We also realized that this was a very new experience for everyone, right? I mean, we all worked from home from time to time on some days in the past. But this time it was everyone and every day, week after week. Completely new experience for all of us in GIC and globally for most people. And we thought that we needed to find out how people were doing, right, in this new situation. Quickly created a pulse survey using the Glint platform to find out how people were doing, whether they were getting the necessary managerial support, how they were coping with work and home responsibilities, such as home-based learning for children, whether the IT infrastructure was sufficient, to allow them to do their work. And we were really glad to run that pulse, because it was a very quick and efficient way to just hear from the ground. And I think by then, everybody was so attuned to communicating digitally that we got a very high response rate and over a 7-day period. And we got really good feedback on what has gone really well and what else we needed to do to support them in that new work arrangement. Following that first pulse, actually, after 5 to 6 weeks, we ran another pulse, right, just to find out whether people have normalized in their work patterns, whether some of the solutions that we have rolled out, have addressed their needs. So actually, one of the feedback that came out from the first pulse, was the blurring of lines, right, between their work life and home life. And we decided to dig deeper into that, right, because it really affects people's well-being, productivity, and all that. So we decided to track or look into email patterns. So, on an anonymized basis, so that it's not too intrusive, we analyze our email volume, and when, at which time of the day the emails were sent, and we compared that data 4 weeks before we went into work from home mode, and the 4 weeks after that. And what we found was that email volume went up by about 30%. Wouldn't that be expected, right? Because we were no longer in the office where we could just easily, talk to each other across the aisle. And in the absence of that, people send emails. So perhaps the 30%, was expected and reasonable. But what was interesting was that we also found the email volume going up over the lunch hour, after 6 p.m. and over the weekend on Saturday and Sundays. And the increase, was in the range of, 25% to 30%, which means that not only are people, sending more emails in general, but they are also engaging in email communication, over lunch, after 6 p.m., over the weekend. And that, validated the feedback, right, the qualitative feedback from the Pulse survey, that people are just basically working longer hours and into their personal time as compared to the past. What's also interesting is we decided to track this because we thought maybe after a while people will settle to some kind of a norm or make adjustments, right, to a separate work life from family life. So we tracked that for another 4 weeks. And we found out that actually the pattern hasn't changed, not normalized. It was still plus 30 overall. It was still plus over the lunch hour after 6 p.m. and over the weekend. And then we continue to track that for the third month, and that was in June, and the pattern has still not changed. And so it told us that actually that has become the new way that people are working. So just to share with you, some of the work that we've been doing to listen to our employees, what their experience is, and validating that or getting more color through data analytics. Actually, the most important thing is once we've got the feedback and whatever insights we can draw from data is to take actions, right, to address some of these needs. I can share with you three, of the things that we've done amongst others. The first is forward communication. So one of the feedback from the Pulse surveys was that people want to know what we are thinking because the situation was evolving. There was a lot of uncertainty. And people are just anxious, right? Like, okay, what next? For how long more are we going to work from home? Is this, going to be the next 3 weeks, 3 months, or 9 months, or 12 months? And as we look back, we could all remember, right, that the situation was evolving, and frankly, it wasn't very clear even to management, what was going to happen, in the next, 2 to 4 weeks each time. But we understand that people want to be kept up to date with how management is thinking. So we really stepped up on our communication, right? Sharing with them our understanding of the situation, how we are thinking about it, even if we do not have any immediate actions to share with them, but at least we keep them informed on how we are thinking about the future, even as we continue to take in new information. And I think people appreciate. The other thing that we did was timeout, right? So I was sharing about the blurring of lines between personal time and work time. And basically, people are not taking the breaks as they normally would. And because, they had nowhere else to go, right? We were all stuck at home. And it wasn't natural for people to take their annual leave, just to rest or take a break at home. Just this whole experience was just too new. And in order to kind of help people form new habits, right, and to really make this arrangement more sustainable and to avoid burnout, we introduced what we call a special timeout. And essentially, we're telling people that every 2 weeks, please take 1 day off, and that's called special timeout, just to break that pattern, right? Or get into the mode of you need to take a break, even though you are stuck at home and not going anywhere else. And so we did that for 3 months just to get people into the habit of taking regular breaks. And people really appreciated that. Not everybody took out the special timeout, right? We also tracked, the take-up rate. Not everybody took it up, but there was a lot of appreciation for the organization understanding what they're experiencing. The third thing was the setup of the home office. Before COVID, we all had our laptops and we would work from home for a few hours in the evenings or on weekends, but not for 9 hours and every day, right? Which is now the new work arrangement. And we all know how small the screen on a laptop is, and how usually, when placed on the desk, the neck posture and all that might not be the right one, especially over 9 hours. So we very quickly recognized that the home office is here to stay, and even beyond COVID, we expect people to spend a lot more time working from home, right? And therefore, it is important that they are well set up to work effectively. And so we provided everyone with a basic bundle so that everybody can be effective with the right tools working from home. Simple setup, like a monitor, with the right size and a keyboard and so on, to make sure that everybody has an effective basic setup at home. So these, were some of the things that we've done in response to the feedback and what we know that people would need to be effective working from home. Moving on to the next area of attention, I coined the term intentional connect because we realized that when we are all distributed and not in the office, a lot of the connection that would normally have taken place might not take place or are not happening at all, right? The run into people along the corridor, at the office cafe, at the pantry, going out for lunch together. All these connections are important, and we want to make sure that it is sustained, right, and perhaps done in a different way. So we have this intentional connect. A framework, and we want to ensure that we keep up, with the various dimensions of that. So just to share with you the three things that we are, focused on. The first is alignment, right? Even though we are not seeing each other physically, but we want to ensure that everyone is aligned, still aligned in terms of our business outcomes and objectives that we want to focus on. And also culture, right? In the past, we would have town halls and team bonding activities, offsites, and so on. We want to make sure that that topic is not lost, right, in the midst of the evolving situation. We created a lot more senior management video sessions with small groups, with large groups, globally, to continue to talk about business objectives as well as our culture. And we, for example, HR organize our corporate values, our prime values. We call them our prime values, and we created an initiative out of our prime values in the occasion of our anniversary, which happened to fall in May. And so we created this whole exercise around sharing stories about people exhibiting our prime values, and that was very well received. The second area is on collaboration, which is really key in our type of business in GIC. And we know that collaboration relies a lot of people who know other people, right? Not only in their own teams, but in other teams, in other offices, in other functional groups. And we want that to continue. We don't want fewer people to know other people in other teams, especially new joiners, who wouldn't have the natural opportunities to form those new work relationships. We are developing a platform that is somewhat like an internal LinkedIn kind of platform where people can look for other colleagues with similar professional areas of interest or skill sets or things they are working on, somewhat like a LinkedIn where you can see someone's background and then you make connections with them. And also at a social level as well, right? To make it more interactive and more natural for people to make connections and get to know other people. So that's something that we are working on to ensure that those linkages are made and sustained. The last area is perhaps on the softer side, on the sense of belonging. Again, we don't want to take for granted that when we are all distributed and every video meeting is very work focused. We realize the importance on the softer side of building cohesion, a sense of fun, and we are in this together. And so what we are doing in this space is to create a community of all the connectors in all the business groups. So all our business groups would have a community connector, and we want to bring all those community connectors together to form like a community of practice where we can share, best practices of how we are all trying to build that cohesion and sense of belonging, understanding the science of what adds to sense of belonging, and giving them the recognition, right, and the legitimacy to do that, because that's important to ensure that our units run and we are effective in our business. How we're pathing towards the future. A lot of companies have come out to share their plans going forward. Some have come out to say that their employees can work from anywhere else in the world, or or from home for the foreseeable future. And we are aware that our employees would be keen to know what's GIC thinking, right? When it is safe for all to return to the office, right? We are in the investment management business where people and how people interact and learn from each other. The innovation that comes from talking with each other, coming together is very important. How we need to teach the juniors, on the job, how new people get to know other people to form their networks. All these things are key to the success of our type of business. What we call social capital, which we are very aware that if we do not continue to build on or sustain, it's just going to erode over time. And so our thinking is this, and we have communicated that to our employees, that when it is safe for all to return to the office will remain as the hub of our activities. And we believe that that is the model that will work for GIC. But we also, believe that we do not want to let go of the positives that we have seen from flexible working from home, for example. And so while office remains as the hub of activities where we would expect, people to be in the office on most days of the week, we would offer flexibility of people choosing to work from home 1 or 2 days a week, so that on an average day we still have a sizable majority for that interaction and building of social capital over time. So that's how we are thinking about the future, and we have communicated that to our employees, and the feedback has been positive. I think people see the thinking behind that, and they also appreciate the flexibility as compared to our pre-COVID arrangement of work. So, I've come to the end of my sharing. Thank you for listening. I'll be happy to, hear, your comments, hear your ideas, and also answer any question that you might have in the next session. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Peter and Archana. I'm sure our audience have had valuable takeaways from that particular session. Thank you, everyone, for participating, and I hope it has been useful and valuable for you. It is now time to take the learning ahead with Peter and Archana in the live speaker room. Those of you who have registered, please click on the link to join their speaker room. Thank you so much, everyone, and we will see you very shortly.